Our final topics of discussion are going to be public policies and clinical practice, as well as multiculturalism. And so we're going to begin with public policies and clinical practice. Public policies are definitely those policies that are related to broader systems in which our clients are assessed and treated. So these systems can include their homes, it can include schools, healthcare settings, any of those areas in which they find themselves being treated for something or being assessed. One thing that is important to keep in mind is that these systems can be changed at any time, and that can be a good thing and also can be a bad thing for our clients. It's important that we as SLPs are advocates for our individual clients who have communication disorders, and really just people who have communication disorders as a whole, so that effective policies are not changed in a negative way. So what makes a policy good? Well, good policies are those types of policies that are effective for addressing the rights and needs of people with disabilities. A good policy is one that will provide access to services for individuals with disabilities, specifically in our case, those with communication disorders. Good policy also provides opportunities for them to participate no matter what the situation is. They would have that opportunity to participate. We oftentimes will view bad policies if those policies limit access specifically to interventions for our individuals with communication disorders. So, for example, Medicare Part B regulations. These regulations have put a cap on reimbursement for services. So, according to Medicare Part B, right now the cap is $1,880. So, individuals who qualify for services have Medicare will cover $1,880 worth of services. But the kicker is those services or that cap is for both speech services and physical therapy services. So that doesn't go very far. This policy, from a societal perspective, definitely is good because society looks at it as, well, if we put a cap on this, then we're not going to run out of money and Medicare can continue. However, for our clients, the policy is bad because lots of our elderly clients, especially, or individuals who have significant events such as a stroke or a TBI, they oftentimes need access to not only speech services but physical therapy services as well. And so with this cap, it oftentimes causes them to have to choose which of those services is more important to them at that point. And what do you think people choose the most? They typically will choose physical therapy initially because of the mobility aspect. And so speech, oftentimes they don't get as many sessions due to that regulation. So, public policies, because they change frequently, it is critical that we as professionals review the current policies, have a good understanding of those, but also review any updated proposals for policy changes. If they are policy revisions, if they've already gone through, you've got to have an understanding of what those updates are. So we're going to review some basic terms that I think are necessary for you to understand discussion in the future on public policy. Public policy in general can be described as any action that's taken by local, state, or federal officials to address a given problem or set of problems, and can occur in many forms. So we're going to talk about 4 ways that public policy takes on shape. The first is a law. Laws begin as bills that are proposed, and they have to move through legislative committees. Depending on whether you're at the state or federal level, they're going to move through certain committees, and they have to move through those committees before they can go to the executive official, such as the president or the state's governor, for them to sign into law. In order for it to become law, it has to be signed by that executive official, and any changes to these laws cannot be done without action by the legislative body that actually created them. So that's important to know. Changes can't be made easily with laws. Regulations are similar to laws, except they're generated by executive agencies that are charged with interpreting and implementing particular laws. So, for example, the Texas Education Agency, TEA, they are charged with interpreting federal education law and creating a regulation at the state level. Before regulations are passed, there generally is a period of time where they call for public comment, where the agency itself will review those public comments and make any alterations if needed before the regulation is passed. Regulations, just like laws, cannot be changed without action by the regulatory body that created them. So once a regulation is put in place, it is a little more difficult to get change to occur unless you have buy-in by that regulatory body. Guidelines occur at the local level and are developed by entities such as communities, school districts, healthcare agencies, hospitals, professional associations like ASHA or TISHA. These guidelines are typically a local interpretation of the legislative and or regulatory mandates. So guidelines are the way local officials or agencies interpret those laws and regulations. These obviously carry less legal weight, but they are easier to change. And then I want you to understand what case law is. So case law really refers to the outcome of any kind of litigation that occurs because of a breach in the law or a regulation. Court cases often are what set precedents on how policies are interpreted and implemented for future situations. So it's important that we understand what that case law says so that we know how to interpret in a way that the federal and or state government or agencies meant for it to be interpreted. For example, RTI, response to intervention, that's a law, but school districts have varying guidelines on how that law is interpreted or how that regulation is interpreted and how they implement RTI at the local level. So that's just an example of that. As a professional, it is our responsibility to understand, implement, and influence public policy. While some may choose to advocate at a larger scale by visiting the state capitol and or maybe Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., others of us might make just as much of an impact by advocating for our individual clients at the local level. For example, we might advocate for someone who at first might not appear to qualify for services due to overly strict interpretation of eligibility guidelines. This might also include calling and writing to third-party payers on behalf of our individual clients who have been denied funding. No matter which area of advocacy you are involved in, as a professional, when you enter the professional workforce, I want you to think about ways that you can advocate for positive change for your clients. That is critical. And all of us have really a responsibility to take on a piece of advocacy and advocate not only for our clients, but for our profession as well.